Alright, what's going on, guys? We just finished watching the Taipei Game Show segment about Elden Ring, where Yasuhiro Kitao did a special showcase answering questions and discussing new details about the game. Now, this showcase was about what we expected it to be. With the game being so close to release, a month now, I kinda doubted that we would see anything too crazy here, but turns out we actually did get quite a bit of new footage. We got to see some new areas, some new weapons, as well as some new spells, and on top of that, the music in the background was the Elden Ring soundtrack that we haven't heard yet. I know one of them was the complete version of Godric's theme, although there was a lot of talking going on, so we didn't actually get to hear it in top quality. The details that they were discussing in the background didn't seem to be anything too crazy and new, but I will touch on the questions asked and the answers provided at the end of the video. Now, we have a lot to break down, so before we do that, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. This channel is your one-stop shop for all things Elden Ring. But now, let's get into the new stuff. During this presentation, we got almost 5 minutes of new footage, and there is a lot to look at here. And the first sort of new thing we see was this overview shot of Limgrave and then a fight with a Gil at sunrise. But after that, we get to see this new samurai armor set in action. Now, this armor set was actually shown in a screenshot a while back, but now we get to see it in its actual color without the orange tinge of a phantom. Now, a lot of people thought that the samurai armor set didn't really fit the theme of the game, but I do need to say a tiny spoiler warning here. If you don't want to know about the starting classes, go ahead and skip ahead like 15 seconds. A credible leak a long time ago suggested that samurai was actually going to be one of the starting classes. Now, for those of you that played the network test, you gotta remember that the starting classes of that are not going to be the ones we see in the final game. But we also need to talk about the area this is taking place in because we haven't seen it yet. But we can also pinpoint this by taking a look at the screenshot we just talked about. This is happening over in these rock structures off to the right of Raya Lucaria. Now, based on past clips that we've seen before, we know this connects to that autumn area we saw in the gameplay preview. Now, I could get into spoiler territory there by talking about the leaked map, but I'm going to save that for another time because I know there's some of y'all that still haven't seen that and don't want to, even though it's nothing too crazy. But we then get to see an entrance into another dungeon before the clip ends. In the next scene, we get to take a deeper dive into Stormvale Castle and some of the areas we didn't get to see in the network test. Now, I know the data mine provided a lot of exploration into Stormvale, but I myself have not looked at that, so this counts as new footage. But the player is wearing a new armor set in this, which might be the foundation of a new thief starting class. But we get to see him use this dagger and a buckler against one of these tarnish hunters here. He rapidly switches back to another dagger and does a few power stance moves here, which I think look really cool. And it also appears to do some sort of bleed damage, which I believe is called hemorrhaging. But take a look at this real quick. Look at the way the Tarnish Hunter ducks beneath this arrow. I never saw this happen during the network test, but I like that enemies are now finding more ways to switch up their defenses when you use different weapons. But right after he shoots that arrow, we get to see a new item in use. We know it's not a spell because he pulls it out of his pocket and uses it in the right hand without a staff or catalyst. But it's cool that it provides this cloud of almost seeking soul masses to create passive damage while you switch back to your other weapons. And speaking of weapons, we finally get to see one that a lot of people have been waiting for. It's this giant stone halberd used by the golem, and it looks absolutely awesome. The player character here also seems to be wearing a new armor set that we haven't seen. This sort of steel heavy armor covered in cloth. And this looks like an ideal strength build because we know that strength is going to also increase your vitality or carry weight, and I think because it's going to be doubling both those stats now, we're going to be seeing some very creative builds in Elden Ring. We also get to see a few new glintstone spells in action. Nothing too crazy, but I can definitely see some utility with these to set up some nice spell combos. But up next, we get to see a spirit summon that we've been waiting to see more of. The big bird used by the Tarnish Hunters that apparently breathes fire, and it looks very powerful. You can see it just knocking around this really powerful enemy that I know I and a lot of others struggled with in the network test. So that is definitely going to be a summon to look out for. The next clip showcases the wolf summon, but more importantly, look what the player character is using. Aside from even more new armor, he's power stancing whips. And just based on how much movement is going on when he swings them around, it actually looks like it's going to be very hard to deal with in PvP. But it makes me so happy that power stancing is returning because it's going to allow for so much weapon variety. Up next, we see a new location and the player character sneaking around a tree sentinel. But I want to appreciate the atmosphere behind those stones back there. For some reason, the moonlight and the stars look so much better than they did in the network test. And I don't know if that's just me, but I definitely just noticed that. Another important note is that the character is wielding the S-Stock. I don't know how many S-Stock lovers we have out there, but if you are happy about that, let me know down in the comments. distance. I need to also mention that this shot really shows how massive Raya Lucaria is. We never really got a good look at it from all the distance shots we've seen, but to me that looks like it could be at least as big as Anne Orlando, if not even bigger. So to everybody saying that they're worried the legacy dungeons aren't going to be big enough, there you go. The next scene showcases a new armor set that kind of looks like a battle mage robe. It's simple, but it looks really cool, and we can also see that giant bear on the left there. This area, as we now know from the tweet last Friday, is known as the Misty Woods, but it quickly switches to a new shot back in the area we started at, showcasing the autumnal forest east of Raya Lucaria. And I can't quite tell if we've seen this armor set before or not, but it looks really cool. I kinda get the impression with the armor in this game, that they might be going for a more grounded aesthetic than the very outlandish armor that we see in Dark Souls. And very sneakily and quickly he glances over at this giant castle below the bridge, that I think is probably some sort of optional area because I don't think it's quite big enough to be a legacy dungeon. It doesn't have those same castle towers that we could see in the other image behind this area, but I think it speaks to something bigger that we can expect these huge, optional areas hidden in these enclaves of the world. So to everybody complaining that they don't think the world is going to be dense, I don't think you have anything to worry about. And the final new item we get to see today is actually a great axe, and this thing looks like it hits hard, sending two of the enemies flying way up into the air. But that was all for the new footage that we saw today and the new things that we learned. They did confirm that there will be no more delays for Elden Ring and it will be releasing on the scheduled release date. The interview with Kitao did a really good job at explaining the game for people that might not know how exactly Elden Ring is going to differ from the past Souls games. And he listed a lot of the reasons I covered in the last video. Things like how the story is going to be much more hands-on just like it was in Sekiro, and that our actions as the player are going to affect the story. For those of us that have been following Elden Ring for a long time, the interview didn't really offer any new information that we haven't already heard before. However, if you would like to watch it with English subtitles, I have a link down in the description below. But as of right now, those are the main points that we learned today, specifically all the new footage they showed. I'm very happy with how this presentation was handled. It didn't show too much, and the things that it did show to us were new and refreshing, and piqued our interest rather than blatantly spoiling anything. We are now exactly 1 month away from the release of Elden Ring, and things are about to start moving really fast. So in the final weeks leading up to release, we're going to be getting a lot of information, and if you want that information the fastest and without spoilers, I recommend following me over on Twitter, where I can get that information to you guys as quickly as possible. But let me know your thoughts on all the new footage we got today down below in the comments. That's going to pretty much do it for the video, and I hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like on it and subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll catch you in the next one.